The year is 1993, and we're about to embark on an adventure 65 million years in the making. Welcome to A Year in Film History, a series where we go year by year and take a look at the interesting, controversial, and sometimes wacky things that happened in the film industry. And in this video, we're setting our sights on the year where the box office broke records, a passion project swept the Oscars, and our favorite plumber made his debut on the big screen, 1993. We're starting off the movie section strong with what became the highest grossing film of all time when it released, Jurassic Park. Directed by Steven Spielberg, Jurassic Park took blockbusters to the next level, earning over $900 million at the box office worldwide, which actually replaced another movie directed by Steven Spielberg, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, as the highest grossing film to that point. This film is regularly cited as one of the greatest action thriller movies and regularly appears on lists of the most influential films and most magical moments from movies. It was so beloved by many that it gave rise to the Jurassic Park generation, which is a generation of young people inspired to become paleontologists, which resulted in a rise of discoveries about dinosaurs in the years to come. It also inspired the name of a team that is really close to my home, the Toronto Raptors. When the NBA created a basketball team in Toronto in 1995, they adopted the name the Toronto Raptors, and the outdoor park where people watch the games on the big screen is actually called Jurassic Park. But why was it so successful? Well, because of its storytelling and how it pushed boundaries in special effects, specifically CGI. We'll talk more about visual effects in the technology section of this video, but I wanted to mention that they were so impressive at the time that the movie went on to win the Oscar for Best Visual Effects, as well as sound editing and sound mixing. Honestly, just that night scene with the T-Rex and it roaring is enough for me to cast a vote for all three. This movie also took product marketing to the next level. Universal Pictures wasted no time during the film's pre-production, which was very lengthy, might I add, and carefully planned the marketing campaign for the movie. The campaign cost $65 million and included deals with 100 companies to market it alongside 1,000 products, which of course included McDonald's. This movie had one of the most successful marketing campaigns to this day, although some people claim it was too much. But then again, the movie was super successful, which means it probably worked. And you'd think that having a single movie, especially Jurassic Park, released in 1 year is enough, but this wasn't the only Steven Spielberg movie released in 1993. We also got Schindler's List. Based on the humanitarian acts of German industrial Nazi party member Oskar Schindler, this movie brought to light a story that had gone mostly under the radar since the tragic events of the Holocaust. Schindler used his influence within the party to save the lives of more than 1,000 Jewish people by recruiting them to work in his Polish factories. This film was a project that Spielberg was very passionate about, and one that he originally didn't want to take on because he felt that he wasn't prepared enough or mature enough to direct a film about the Holocaust. Before finally taking the project on, he offered it to a few other directors. Roman Polanski, who was a Holocaust survivor and whose mother was killed in Auschwitz, but he declined. Sidney Pollack, who also passed, until he finally proposed it to Martin Scorsese, who accepted. But after some time, Spielberg had a change in heart and ended up trading Scorsese the rights to a movie he'd been developing that would later become the remake of Cape Fear. After learning about this, I actually wonder how different the film would have been if Scorsese was the one to direct it. This was a very risky project for Universal, who ended up getting cold feet about making it. They agreed to let Spielberg go forward with it, but struck a deal that he would make Jurassic Park first, and after that, he could go on and work on his passion project. This is why two Spielberg-directed films came out in the same year. Jurassic Park released in June for the blockbuster season, and Schindler's List released in December. Spielberg took this movie very seriously. He did his own research and traveled to Poland before principal photography to interview Holocaust survivors and visit the real-life locations he planned to show in the film. Spielberg didn't want any big-name stars to portray Schindler, as to not take away from the film's message, which is why he cast Liam Neeson, a then unknown Irish actor, in the main role. Kevin Costner and Mel Gibson both auditioned for this role. He also didn't think that a movie on this topic should be made for financial reward, so he relinquished his salary and any proceeds he would make in perpetuity, calling the gains he would have made blood money. All of the profits were used to found the USC Shoah Foundation, which was established in 1994 to honor and remember the survivors of the Holocaust by collecting personal recollections and audio-visual interviews. And the fact that the movie was shot in black and white was also controversial, with almost everyone pushing back against the idea. The only person who supported it was Janusz Kaminski, the director of photography. The reason for all this pushback was because people thought it would stylize the Holocaust, but Spielberg went on to say that it's entirely appropriate because I've only experienced the Holocaust through other people's testimonies and through archival footage, which is of course black and white. And as we know, he ended up getting his way. The film went on to win 7 of the 12 Oscars it was nominated for at the Academy Awards, including Best Picture and a Best Director award for Spielberg. I'd say this was a pretty good but very busy year for him. The 90s were a time where movies with odd concepts shined, and there's no better movie to talk about than Mrs. Doubtfire. Starring Robin Williams and Agent 007, Mrs. Doubtfire burst onto the scene in 1993. This is one of those movies that I think of when I think of the 90s and how different they are than today. A studio taking a risk on a funny man who disguises himself as a female housekeeper just so he can interact with his children. That kind of idea is straight from the 90s, and it actually went on to be the second highest grossing film of 1993. It made a whopping $441.3 million at the box office on a budget of only $25 million. But even though it did really well at the box office, it didn't do nearly as well with the critics, with an average rating of 5.9 on Rotten Tomatoes and 53 on Metacritic. What made this film so special is how it touched on topics that were traditionally considered taboo, especially in children's films such as that of divorce. And instead of showing a happy ending of the children's story where the parents would be reunited, the film went on to teach a valuable lesson of what a family in this situation could look like. It went on to win the Academy Award for Best Makeup, which seems like a no-brainer. And then we have everybody's favorite video game movie, 1993's Super Mario Bros. Directed by the husband and wife team of Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, this was the first video game film released ever. But just because you're the first doesn't mean you're the best. The film grossed only $38.9 million on a budget of $42 to $48 million. It was received very poorly by both critics and audiences, sitting at a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes and a score of 35 on Metacritic. It appears on several lists of the worst films ever made, but over time, the movie has become somewhat of a cult classic. But how could something that is so different from the original source material have ever been made? It was because producer Roland Joffe obtained the Mario film rights from Nintendo and was given a creative freedom license because Nintendo believed that the Mario brand was so strong and well known that it could hold up to experimentation. But boy oh boy were they wrong. But let's move on to another movie. Originated from a poem that was written by Tim Burton in 1982 while working as an animator at Walt Disney Productions, The Nightmare Before Christmas came out this year. And contrary to popular belief, it was not directed by Tim Burton, but instead Henry Selick. The film was a hit with the critics and fairly successful at the box office. It earned praise for its characters, song, score, and animation, especially for how it innovated the stop-motion art form. It was the first animated film to be nominated at the Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects, but ended up losing to Jurassic Park. To create this film, a development deal was made with Walt Disney Studios, but it ended up being released through Touchstone Pictures because the studio thought the film was too dark and scary for kids. This movie is now a classic and has had many different forms of media created around it, ranging from concerts, to video games, to books, to comics and mangas. And it also sparked the debate of whether this is a Christmas or Halloween film. But we're not going to chime in on this topic, so we'll let you dish it out in the comments below. Some other notable films that came out this year are Groundhog Day, Dazed and Confused, A Bronx Tale, which was Robert De Niro's first of 2 films directed by him, but this wasn't it. So many great films came out this year, and you can see some of them on screen now. In this section, we're going to go over the 1994 Oscars for movies that came out in 1993. And finally, we have someone new hosting this time around. After hosting 4 years in a row with declining ratings, Billy Crystal announced that he will not be hosting this year's Oscars. Instead, we had Whoopi Goldberg hosting, and the reception was overall positive. When Whoopi was announced as the host, there was some media backlash and concerns that her raunchy and outspoken sense of humor wouldn't be appropriate for the general audience. But Gil Cates, who was the producer at the time, reassured everyone that Whoopi was really smart, passionate about this, and that everything would be appropriate. Goldberg said that going from watching, to winning, to hosting in a single lifetime is major. She was the first woman as well as the first African American to host the awards ceremony solo. During this year's ceremony, we saw Tom Hanks win his first ever Oscar, which was for Best Actor in Philadelphia. This was his second time being nominated, with the first being for his role in 1989's Big. We also had Anna Paquin win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for her role in The Piano. The crazy part was that she was 11, making her the second youngest winner for a competitive acting Oscar. If you're wondering who the youngest was, it was Tatum O'Neal, who won for her role in 1973's Paper Moon at the age of 10. We also saw Schindler's List go on to win 7 of its 12 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Cinematography, among a few more. And you'd probably think that I'd say this film dominated the Oscars, but I actually think Steven Spielberg dominated the Oscars this year. 10 of the Little Golden Men trophies went to films he directed, 7 for Schindler's List and 3 for Jurassic Park. This year, we also saw the first of many future nominations for Leonardo DiCaprio. Unlike many of his others where he was nominated for Best Actor, this time it was for Supporting Actor for his role in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And similar to the last video, I want to talk about the Razzies. It's not specifically related to the Oscars, but it's still fun to talk about. We had Burt Reynolds win, or maybe lose depending on how you look at it, the Worst Actor award for his role in Cop and a Half. We also saw Arnold Schwarzenegger nominated for Worst Actor for Last Action Hero. Madonna won, or again lost, for Worst Actress in Body of Evidence, and Janet Jackson scooped up the award for Worst New Star for her role in Poetic Justice. Talking about how Jurassic Park pushed boundaries of film tech alone could fill up an entire video, but we wanted to focus on a few of the more important aspects of how it did this. After Terminator 2 Judgment Day, I'm sure many people saw what was possible with CGI, but Steven Spielberg still wasn't convinced that it could be used to generate dinosaurs with all their movement and variety of textures. He was actually planning on using a technology called Go Motion, which was a form of stop motion to show the dinosaurs moving on the big screen. But a keen pair of ILM animators were adamant on showing Spielberg what was possible with CGI. Mark Dipp and Steve Williams were so convinced that CGI was the way to go for this film, that Williams ended up going behind the creative director's back to create an animation of the T-Rex walking. Yada yada yada, some stuff happened, but it all ended up with Steven Spielberg being so impressed by this animation that he immediately changed his mind and moved away from using Go Motion. This movie was a perfect example of how to use CGI to enhance the experience versus being the main thing to create the experience. It combined CGI and practical effects to create a world we could have only dreamed about in years before. This was a landmark in visual effects and made many filmmakers realize that their visions, which were previously thought impossible or too expensive, were now possible. I even read that Peter Jackson began to re-explore his childhood love of fantasy films because of Jurassic Park, which led him to create The Lord of the Rings and King Kong. There are even rumors that this movie inspired George Lucas to make the Star Wars prequels after seeing what was possible. So we have Steven Spielberg to thank for Jar Jar. Jurassic Park still mostly holds up to this day, especially that night scene with the T-Rex. It's still fear-inducing with the way it combines its visuals and sound effects. As I already mentioned, the movie went on to win all 3 of its Academy Award nominations for Best Visual Effects, Best Sound, and Best Sound Editing, which were all very well deserved. Also on the topic of technology, we wanted to talk about an independent film documentary called Wax, or The Discovery of Television Among Bees. It was directed by underground film director David Blair on a low budget and wasn't even released in 1993. It actually came out in 1991. So you may be wondering, why are we talking about it? Well, in May of 1993, this was the first ever film to be transmitted over the internet. It was played on a VCR and fed into a computer that converted it into digital form, transmitting it over the internet at a whopping 2 frames per second. It doesn't seem impressive by today's standards, but this was basically the beginning of online streaming as we know it today, which we think is a pretty big technological event. Almost our entire world these days is digital, and we can stream almost any piece of content over the internet with ease, and it can all be traced back to this. So thank you for making FilmStack possible. 1993 was the year where Disney agreed to change some very controversial and racist lyrics in the opening song Arabian Nights from 1992's Aladdin. The song was describing the film's Arabian setting and originally had the lyrics where they cut off your ears if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. It received a lot of complaints from the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee and was changed to where it's flat and immense and the heat is intense, it's barbaric, but hey, it's home in mid-1993. This year, we also saw the arrest of Heidi Fleiss, also known as the Hollywood Madam. She was responsible for arranging high-class hookers in the early 90s for some high-rolling celebrities, sheikhs, and corporate executives. She was arrested by the LAPD and charged with narcotics possession of cocaine, pimping, and pandering. In 1997, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for tax evasion, but ended up serving less than 2. And then in 2004, she went on to sell her life story to Paramount Pictures for $5 million, which ended up spawning the made-for-TV film Call Me: The Rise and Fall of Heidi Fleiss. In June of 1993, we also saw Woody Allen deny the custody of his 3 children with Mia Farrow. And then to put the cherry on top, in September of 1993, a Connecticut state attorney announced that he had probable cause to prosecute him on charges of inappropriate behavior on his adopted daughter Dylan. These charges were later dropped to spare her from the trauma of appearing in court. Woody Allen denounced the entire investigation, and a month later, the New York State Department of Social Services dropped its investigation, concluding that no credible evidence was found. I also want to talk about the class of 1993, but before we do, I have to admit something to everyone. I lied about something in our last video. I said that as we go through the years, we're starting to see less and less big name stars being born. But on July 1st of 1993, one of the world's biggest stars was born. Me, Dominic. Oh, and we also had some other smaller names such as Pete Davidson, Will Poulter, Miranda Cosgrove, Ariana Grande, and Victoria Justice, among a few others. And on a sadder side, we also saw some film-related deaths this year, the most notable of which were Brandon Lee and River Phoenix. Brandon Lee, son of Bruce Lee, was killed during the filming of The Crow. On March 31st, 1993, while filming a scene for the film where Brandon's character is supposed to be killed by thugs, one of the thug actors fired a revolver at Lee's character as he walked into the room. Because of an improperly managed prop gun, a projectile was shot out of the gun, hitting Brandon, causing him to fall backwards instead of forwards as he was supposed to. After the director yelled cut, Lee didn't stand up and the crew thought he was either still acting or kidding around. Unfortunately, he wasn't, and when that became apparent, he was rushed to a medical center. After 6 hours of emergency surgery, he was pronounced dead. He was 28 years old at the time. This year, we also saw the death of River Phoenix, who was a 23-year-old Hollywood heartthrob at the time. He collapsed outside a W Hollywood nightclub and died from drug-induced heart failure due to a cocaine and morphine overdose. This happened during the filming of Dark Blood, which was later completed and released in 2012. The most popular TV show of 1993 was yet again CBS's 60 Minutes. It was followed by ABC's Home Improvement, then NBC's Seinfeld. In November of this year, TV Food Network, now known as Food Network, premiered on television. It was owned by Television Food Network GP, which was a joint venture between Warner Brothers, Discovery Networks, and Next Start Media Group. Also this year, Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Christina Aguilera, and Ryan Gosling joined the cast of the Disney Channel series, The New Mickey Mouse Club. Yes, if you didn't already know this, all of them are Disney Channel stars. And another fun fact about TV for everyone watching. Do you remember those Got Milk commercials? Do you remember the first Got Milk commercial? The one where the guy tried to answer a question over the phone but couldn't because he had peanut butter in his mouth and couldn't wash it down because he ran out of milk? Well, that was directed by Michael Bay. Yes, that Michael Bay. Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, Transformers director Michael Bay. This commercial is often regarded as one of the best commercials and kicked off the entire Got Milk commercial mania, which went on to include celebrities such as Britney Spears, Beyonce, Rihanna, and even fictional characters were included such as The Simpsons, Batman, and Mario. This year, we also saw some new shows premiering: Beavis and Butthead, Frasier, Animaniacs, and X-Files, among many more. But we also saw a few shows ending, the most notable of which were Doogie Howser MD, Saved by the Bell, and Cheers. And there we have it. We've blasted through 1993. Lots of interesting stuff happened this year in the TV and film industry. But was there anything we missed? What was your favorite movie of 1993? Leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. We also recently started a Patreon with some really cool perks, so if you want to check it out and support us there, the link is in the description. But until next time, have a good one.